President Trump condemning the chemical attack in Syria, but blaming his predecessor, President Obama. Leaders around the world are calling for Syria's Assad to be removed, but President Trump's administration is saying something quite different. Joining us now is Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger from Illinois. He is a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and he served in the U.S. Air Force in both Afghanistan and Iraq. Congressman, thanks so much for being here.
You bet. Yeah, thanks.
You've called what's going on in Syria, quote, absolutely horrific. What do you want the U.S. to do?
Look, this is the first time we have accepted, besides obviously 2013 and the time since, this is the first conflict that we've accepted de facto the use of chemical weapons on a battlefield since World War I. It was a standard that we held very strong as a free world. We upheld a no-fly zone over Iraq for a decade because of the use of chemical weapons. This can't be tolerated. And I think you have a short and a long-term goal here. I think the short term is you are going to have to do some airstrikes against the Assad regime. That means hitting some of their command and control, so effectively decapitating Assad from his fielded forces and commanding them. And then making it clear that if another chemical weapon attack happens, there will be more punishing strikes to follow. And in the long term, I think that is the strategy to be the stick behind being able to get to a diplomatic solution, because up to now, you know, we want to have a negotiated solution that does not include Assad, but there has been no stick or motivation to get to the table.
But Congressman, why do we have to wait for another chemical attack?
Well, I don't think we do. I think right now we have to strike the regime in response to this. This is a major violation of all international norms. I think, again, you decapitate hitting command and controls. I think you ground the Syrian Air Force, and you can do that without a full no-fly zone. You can crater the runways that the aircraft take off on so that they can't take off. If they repair it, you crater it again. You shoot down the helicopters that are delivering these barrel bombs. I know it's frightening for Americans because we've been involved in the Middle East for a very long time. This is a limited objective, the purpose of forcing the parties back to the table, because it's only going to get worse.
Why aren't you calling for Bashar al-Assad to be removed?
Oh, I am. I think he should be gone. And I think as part of this, I thought that Bashar al-Assad is actually really, frankly, the creator of ISIS, because he's creating this next generation of recruits that live in such a terrible environment that it's easy for a group like ISIS or al-Qaeda to come along and recruit them. I don't think there's a future for Syria with Bashar al-Assad in existence. And I think that is something that this administration, you know, frankly, like the last one, I think failed to do. They did in words, but not in deeds. This administration is going to have to come to that reality, or this problem is sadly only going to continue and get worse.
Congressman, this is exactly the opposite of what this administration has said. Just this week, Secretary Tillerson and Ambassador Haley said just the opposite of what you're saying. They're saying that their top priority, in fact, any priority, is no longer to get rid of Bashar al-Assad.
Yeah, well, I'll go you one further on it. They said, in fact, that the future of Syria should be up to the Syrian people. And I would argue the Syrian people, when they started protesting in the streets peacefully, and then when they were murdered and continued to protest and fight against Assad, made it very clear that they want a future without Bashar al-Assad. The problem is, for too long, we sat back, and everybody shares the blame here. I mean, even during the Red Line strikes, there were Republicans out arguing against giving the president the authority. So everybody's, I think, shares some blame. I frankly fear that this is going to be our generation's. You know, Bill Clinton said his greatest regret was non-intervention in Rwanda, and I think that really weighs on his heart. I fear that all of us out here are going to bear the same kind of feeling when it comes to Syria.
Congressman, Bashar al-Assad apparently used chemical weapons this week on his own people. We're seeing videos of children asphyxiating to death. It's
disgusting.
Why is this administration saying it's up to the Syrian people to take him on?
Well, what's interesting here, and I hope that changes, I hope that this is a calculus that the administration looks at and says, they violated a huge norm, obviously. Iran and Russia supposedly had this deal to get rid of all sarin gas. They used sarin gas, apparently. So there's a lot of accountability to be held here. But I hope that the administration sees this as an opportunity to go back and say Bashar al-Assad must go, and not just say it in words, but we need action too.
Yeah, but Congressman, I mean, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but what gives you at all the impression that that's the direction that they'll go, given what they've said this week?
Well, I don't have that. I don't have that feeling yet, but I think this is so horrific, this could begin to change the tide. But look, I've been critical of this administration's policy on Syria. I think to acquiesce Syria to the Russians, to the Iranians, is only going to create another generation of terrorists. And what I fear is that next generational war on terror, which isn't a war at all, it's giving that next generation opportunity. But when they live under the oppression of Assad, when they see their family killed and they think the world isn't looking, it is much easier to be recruited as a 15-year-old into ISIS when you have no hope than a 15-year-old with opportunity.
This morning, Congressman, we spoke to 7-year-old Bana Alabed. She's the little girl who has a Twitter feed. It's her messages that have sort of gripped the world and gotten them to focus on the atrocity of what's going on inside there because she's witnessed it. She had to be evacuated. She's a refugee now in Turkey. Let me play for you what her message was to the U.S. and the world.
The world is watching. The world doesn't do anything.
What do you want the world to do?
I want to stop the war, and I want the children of Syria play and go to school.
Her wants are quite modest. She wants the children of Syria to be able to play and go to school. What do you say as a representative in our government to Bana?
So I'm ashamed of our government's actions so far and inaction. I wish I had the ability to move forces to do what needs to be done. What I would tell to her is, look, people are paying attention. The problem is we need more people to pay attention and get past our fear of action, because of what we felt the wars have been like in the past. We're not talking about another Iraq 3 here, but we're talking about it in a terrible humanitarian crisis. And the thing I try to remind people in all this, whether it was Omran, the little boy sitting in the ambulance, or this young girl, or some of the ones that were killed in yesterday's chemical attack, these are all kids that want to be teachers, they want to be doctors, they want to be police officers, they dream of having a family of their own someday. And an evil dictator named Bashar al-Assad decides that it is to his political advantage to put chemical weapons in their face and choke them to death. That's what's happening. And until the Western world stands up, until Republican or Democratic administration stands up, this is not a partisan issue. This is going to continue.
President Trump has not tweeted about this. He has not made an on-camera statement. What are you calling on him to do today?
Well, I hope he does make an on-camera statement. I hope, he does tweet about it. I think the administration needs a plan to rally our allies together. I think in the short term, again, grounding as much as the Assad Air Force as possible. I think punishing strikes against the regime to make it clear that the cost of using chemical weapons far exceeds any perceived benefit because it's going to cost you buildings and tanks and assets. I think that's the beginning of using the military instrument of power to back the diplomatic instrument of power. But we've got to quit pretending like this is going to burn itself out. It simply isn't. This is an apartment on fire in an apartment building. It's not a house on fire in an isolated neighborhood.
Congressman Kinzinger, thanks so much for being on New Day.
Thanks for talking about this.